Hey guys, don't forget to check out my book by the same name as the podcast, The Gospel of Fire. It is on Amazon. So just go on Amazon.com, The Gospel of Fire, or you can just simply search my name as well, Eliot Marshall, and it will pop up. You can buy the Kindle version or the paperback version. I appreciate the support, and it just kind of goes up in about my life a little bit as a memoir-ish to self-help-ish type book. But check it out. Leave a review if you so choose and you find it helpful or unhelpful, either way. So Amazon.com and then search The Gospel of Fire. Guys, the podcast is also brought to you by Onnit, ONNIT, Human Optimization Company. Again, code word Eliot is the code word for your order on Onnit. You will receive 10% off. Again, ONNIT, all kinds of stuff for human optimization. They have supplements. They have the Total Human. They have all kinds of stuff. Alpha Brain. I love me some Alpha Brain every once in a while when I know I got to sit down, get some work done. The brain just kicks in a little bit. I've enjoyed using the Shroom Tech Sport. It gives that little extra boost when I'm getting ready to go do a workout. So again, ONNIT, code word Eliot, and you will receive 10% off your order. Guys, this podcast is being brought to you by Evo Labs. Evo Labs is a cannabis company who has some of the best CBD products on the market. I really enjoy all their CBD products. They have an intense salve. That is my favorite product, where deals with muscle soreness. You rub it on your muscles. You rub it on your body after a shower, and it really helps relieve the soreness. The other CBD products, all kinds of different ones that you can intake or use, some for sleeping, some for stress and anxiety. Anyway, evolabs.com, go check them out, and you type in the code word FIRE and you will receive 10% off your order. evolabs.com. Ever have sore, beat up fingers after jiu-jitsu? We all have, right? Ever wish there was a better way to ice them down than sticking your fingers in a cup of ice water? Well, now there is. Penguin Fingers. Invented by a jiu-jitsu black belt, Penguin Fingers remove the soreness from your fingers or your toes in just minutes, allowing you to train harder and longer with less damage to your digits. Chronic inflammation is like sand in your joints. Training day in and day out with sore, irritated fingers can leave them arthritic and knobby. Penguin Fingers can stop all of that before it ever starts. Penguin Fingers non-toxic, reusable individual finger ice packs come in boxes of 1, 2, or 4 soft gel sleeves. Simply keep them in your freezer and roll them out onto sore fingers or toes as they're needed. Available on Amazon or at penguinfingers.com. Fingers are life tools. Protect them. Use code 10THEFIRE and you will receive 10% off at checkout. Again, 10THEFIRE for 10% off at checkout at penguinfingers.com. Hey guys, this is former UFC fighter Eliot Marshall, and this is The Gospel of Fire, where we're going to go through the fire to learn how to live the best life possible. Hey guys, this week on the podcast, I have the Golden Snitch, Jeff Novitzky. Man, I have been very interested in Jeff's career and life for a long time. I'm a huge Lance Armstrong fan. Even though I know he's not the best, he hasn't been the best individual in his life and whatnot. I believe that Lance did a great job. He really influenced the world. So I have always wanted to talk to Jeff since all of that was going down, and now he works for the UFC. So let's be clear, he does not work for USADA anymore. He works for the UFC, and he is the athlete's relation side with USADA, but for the UFC. And there's been a lot of interesting cases going around. You know, we have the John Jones case, the TJ Dillashaw case, and now these cases where athletes are being tested at picogram levels where they obviously didn't intentionally cheat or anything like that. So I got to sit down with him and discuss all of that. So I hope you guys enjoyed this episode with Jeff Novitzky. So I am here with the Golden Snitch, Jeff Novitzky. What's up, man?
Nothing. How you doing, Eliot?
Good. I remember listening to it on the Rogan podcast, but how'd you get that nickname again?
I think it was Schaub coined it with Rogan.
Okay.
But yeah, it's one of those things. Snitch is not usually a term of endearment, but I think the fact that I embraced it and not shied away from it as kind of, endeared me to people. I think if you can't laugh at yourself a little bit, then who can you? That's definitely a trait of someone I want to be, friends with, someone that can make fun of themselves. So it's all good.
And plus, man, look, we all know what Rogan is. Rogan's the pod god, right? He like influences culture. So once it goes, you can't fight it. Like that's a losing battle.
Completely. Yeah. It was one of the best things that I did early on. Joe invited me on the podcast, and to be able to talk for, 2.5, 3 hours to, the millions of people that listen to it, really was able to get the message out there of what we're trying to do here with the UFC. So I'm nothing but thankful to him.
Yeah, man. I've talked about it a ton on this podcast. Obviously he comes up a lot because he changes culture, right? He influences a lot of people. And I would say in a very positive way, and that's a big thing, right?
Yeah, the dude is so smart and retains, so much information on so many different subjects, and I think people just, love to hear that, love to hear his opinion, and yeah, shoot, definitely in the MMA world, if you can get his buy-in, you've done your job. MMA
comedy, right? Look what he's done for all his friends, all his comedic friends, they're all rock stars. Because, that all of them, right?
Absolutely.
Look at Schaub. Schaub's the perfect example. He's not. I'm not saying that none of these guys still don't work hard, obviously, but he crushes it for them. And he's very good conversationally. He gets, and he's not afraid to ask the questions in a way that I would say. They're tough questions sometimes, right? The subjects that you guys talked about with Lance and John Jones and some of those things we'll go over again today. But that, they aren't the easiest questions, but he makes the person answering them feel very comfortable.
He does. I've been on there 3 times. And I tell everybody each time, it's 2.5 or 3 hours goes by, and he says, "Okay, we're ready to wrap it up. Anything else?" And each time I thought to myself, "Damn, I must have sucked because." It's been about 45 minutes. These things usually go 2-3 hours. And then I look down at my clock and I'm like, shit, it's been 3 hours. It flies by because you feel like you're sitting in your living room with him just, bullshit. And it's great.
Yeah. So anyway, man, I am super fascinated in what you've done with your career and things like that. Because obviously I'm an athlete or was an athlete. And, I come at it from the perspective sometimes of fuck, when you get to that top level, you'll do anything to be better at your job, right? As the athlete, almost.
Absolutely. Yeah. That's definitely one thing I learned in, my previous career when I was a federal agent investigating these cases. And I tell people, it wasn't because I was anything special. It was just the circumstances that I was in. So I was a federal agent coming to talk to all these athletes and basically telling them, look, if you don't tell me the truth, you're facing prosecution yourself. So you need to tell me the truth here. As long as you do, the athletes were witnesses in our case. We were going after, the performance enhancing drug dealers. So I said, look, as long as you tell me the truth, it's all good. So I think because of that and under those, scenarios, I got really the truth. And not many people get the truth when it comes to PEDs. It's a very private thing.
So you were going after the Balcos.
We were just going after the distributors. The athletes were only witnesses. And in the case where a few of them lied, Barry Bonds probably being the biggest, that's when we prosecuted the athletes. He made the mistake of not telling the truth. But, I talked to Eliot, hundreds probably of athletes that have used, PEDs. And I always ask them, why did you do it? And they were like, well, look, twofold. Number one, the financial incentive to do well in sports. You take care of yourself, your kids' kids, if you have, great careers or even a great season. And number two, they all felt pressure because they thought everybody else was doing it. They're like, how am I going to compete? at this level if everybody else is on something. They almost felt forced to do it. And, some people were surprised that I came away from a lot of those, not saying, I was an idiot for doing that, but saying, man, I kind of get it. Like I don't know that if I wasn't in my young 20s, out of college, competing at a professional sport, if I wouldn't have done it myself. I'd like to think maybe not, but I don't know.
I came up in the massive. I was in the massive drug use in MMA, right? I mean that was my whole career. Yeah, you look at it and I know exactly what it's like. You're looking at it like, God damn, how does that motherfucker train 15 rounds? Right? Like 15 rounds. How is he doing 15 fives today?
Hey, especially in your sport, MMA, I'm talking baseball, football, but man, when it comes to MMA, if you're in that scenario where you're literally protecting your health, safety, and well-being, the pressure is, huge. I totally get it. And that's why I feel so good about what we're doing. And in the conversations that I have with our athletes, a lot of them are like, thank you. I don't have that pressure anymore. I know I'm the outsider if I choose to go down this route, because I most of them believe that the majority are no longer doing that. So it feels good.
I would definitely agree. I don't think they can. Maybe some people are finding some loopholes a little bit, but I would say that they're not doing them in a way that is having a massive. Like, I think you saw some huge changes in performance when you guys when USADA first came over. Like I would say the performances went down a little bit, so because the athletes had to adjust, and
yeah.
I think a lot of guys didn't get busted that maybe they got off, because they were like, fuck, I don't want to get in trouble.
Mm-hmm.
And I think we're seeing that rise up again. I think over the last couple of years now we've seen it rise up. So yeah, I would agree with that statement that you made, that like thank you, because we don't I don't like the risk versus reward, because the odds of being Conor or GSP or Anderson and making that kind of money in the UFC are very small, right? But where in baseball, fuck man, you ride the bench and you're set. You're good.
Yeah, absolutely. I think anyone, and I would never say this, that can say, we've completely eradicated performance-enhancing drug use. There's nobody left. I think anybody that makes statements like that is naive, because it is, and it always will be, a cat and mouse game. I think the cheaters are always a little bit ahead of the science. I think that gap is narrowing, but I'll certainly never say that, we've eradicated everything. But, I would tend to agree with you. I think for the most part, there's been a dramatic improvement. And look, those that, continue to think they can get away with it, I will say this is the longer that you're in the program, the odds go up that you're going to get caught, because, I don't care how sophisticated you are. If USADA DCO knocks on your door, 5, 10 minutes, an hour after you've done something, they're probably going to be able to detect it. And so it just becomes kind of a numbers game.
Yeah, they're not independent events, because it's
exactly.
Yeah, it's not like it's not like flipping a coin. It's not flipping a coin.
No, USADA tells me every single test they do is done with a purpose. So they're not drawing names out of a hat saying, what are we going to get today?
Right.
There's algorithms. They're looking at athletes. They're looking at numbers. They're looking at the biological passport of an athlete. So if they see, for instance, red blood cell count tick up a little bit from one test to the next, they may say, hey, we need to dedicate, 3 tests to this athlete this week. Let's get him.
No shit, huh?
Let's get him one evening, or him or her. Let's get them again the very next thing the next morning, kind of keeping them off guard. And it's interesting because I'll get calls.
So it's not random. I thought it was random.
No, nothing random about it. The term is unannounced or unnoticed, so no one gets noticed, including the UFC, that a test is coming up. But no, there's no randomness about it. Everything's done with a purpose.
That's very interesting. So they're not just like fucking okay, he's clean and whatever. They're like paying attention to what's really going on.
Very much. I mean, they have a science department within USADA. They have PhD scientists looking at urine markers and blood markers in any given test. So not only are they saying, hey, are any of these drugs showing up on this panel? they check that box. And the second thing they do is, hey, let's take a look at the markers in the urine or blood. Is there anything remotely suspicious about this? And if there is, then, that athlete's probably going to be tested a little bit more.
Gotcha. Man, let's talk about picograms. Because I don't understand picograms. Hold on. I understand what a picogram is. It's a very, very low level of measurement, like the lowest you can imagine. And the example is 1 grain of salt cut into 1 trillion pieces, and one of those pieces is a picogram. Fuck, right?
So it's really, you can't even comprehend what a small unit of measurement that is.
Why test that low?
The idea in the science is, at least in the past, so there's a concept called microdosing, where you would use drugs at very, very small amounts so that they would give you a benefit, not the huge benefit that you saw athletes getting in the 80s and 90s when they were using without regard, but a little bit of a benefit. And then on the other side, it clears the system very quickly. So, getting down to the lowest unit of measurement in anti-doping science is an advantage, because even if someone's using at small amounts, you can detect, or if you've caught someone on the tail end of the excretion, so say they loaded in a massive amount 2-3 months ago, you can detect further and further out the lower down that you use for your unit of detection.
Let's talk about Neil for a second, if you can, because Neil's my athlete, right? And just like his, a situation like his, where one day, nothing, and then I think it was 2 or 3 days later, picogram.
Yep.
Where, and you guys and USADA and everyone has come out and let's be clear for my listeners that maybe don't know. You don't work for USADA, you work for the UFC.
Correct. I'm completely independent of USADA, and USADA is completely independent of us, other than we contract them to be the administrator of our anti-doping program.
Yes. And another thing, and let's clear up again before we get into the specifics. Holy fuck, I can't see how anybody getting paid off, unless it's a massive amounts of millions and millions of dollars to one person, like a USADA, like somebody from USADA, because it would ruin the entire thing.
Absolutely. And well, look, our program's important. They're also, via an act of Congress in the United States, designated as the official anti-doping agency of the U.S. Mm-hmm. They receive most of their funding from the U.S. government. The risk that they would take of any program, doing anything untoward, that being paid off by anybody, giving favoritism to any athlete, they would cease to exist if something like that went on. So I am 1,000% confident that nothing like that goes on. It certainly doesn't with our program.
And these are independent labs, right? Like USADA sends the information to independent labs. So for that independent lab, am I correct in saying that?
You are, yep.
So that independent lab, if someone's going to pay, that guy's life is ruined.
Well, first of all, the laboratories don't know who these samples belong to. There's a number on the sample. So when they're testing, they don't know, hey, this is Conor McGregor's sample, and you have some technician that says, man, I really don't like this guy. I'm going to screw him over. There's absolutely no possible way that they do that. All they see is a number. When a positive test comes back, that number is reported by the lab back to USADA. USADA then has, a sheet that shows what number corresponds to what athlete.
Right. And does the B sample go to the same lab, or does the B sample go to a different lab?
Yeah, the B sample's typically at the same lab.
Okay.
And then with the B sample, if an athlete says, I think something going on here, I don't believe that story, they don't know who this belongs to, I want to go watch them, A, open my B sample, and B, test it. And when the athlete gets to the laboratory, they should see that B sample is in the exact same condition as when the athlete provided the sample, when the athlete locked the bottle, when the athlete signed off on the evidence tape around the bottle. Because if any of that's tampered with when the athlete gets there, those results can be thrown out the window if the B sample doesn't confirm, or there's something wrong with the B sample that shows it's been tampered with.
Right. So, again, let's talk about that for a second. Like all those things that you just mentioned are pretty important for, I think, people to know. It's not just like peeing a cup. Okay, so I'm on a testosterone replacement, but I'm not competing professionally, right? So who cares? Yeah, sure. I get my blood drawn, and then they give me a little cup. I piss in the cup. I screw the lid on, and then I put it in like a box, and then I walk away. You know, that and I think that's most people's experience with pissing in a cup, like the layman, right? I think we've all had to take a urine, and that's what we all do when we go to the doctor, right? Yeah. That's not how this works.
No, I mean, have you witnessed any of your athletes doing the USADA drug test?
It's intense, man. It sucks. I think it sucks, but I'm okay. It sucks in the sense of how intense it is.
I agree, and I tell people all the time. Look, it's a burden on athletes. There's time spent. The collection process takes half hour, 45 minutes, maybe longer if you can't take a pee right away. And man, when you're woken up at 5:30, 6 in the morning, or kept up late at night, it's definitely a burden.
Or if you just got your ass kicked.
That too. That makes me feel real bad. It's both sides.
Yeah.
Either you've gotten your ass kicked or you've won, and your family and your coaches are waiting outside the medical tent for you. You're ready to celebrate.
Yeah.
And all of a sudden USADA comes in and says, hey, put that on hold for an hour or two while we stick a needle in your arm or watch you very intimately take a pee into a cup. It sucks, but it's necessary.
It's necessary.
Yeah. Yeah.
And then it's piss in a cup, and then you have to have the times that I've been there, after a fight, a lot of times they were asking for another representative from your team to be there to make,
Yeah. So, I mean, it's well witnessed and documented. The cool thing about it, as you've seen, is the athletes they're peeing in the cup. They're pouring it into the A and the B bottle. The athlete's the one sealing it. The athlete's the one initialing it.
Yes.
The athlete's the one putting it in the box and taping it back up. So there can never be any allegation that, hey, someone was screwing with my sample when they were handling it. It's all done by the athlete. And then again, when they get to the lab, they can see that it's in the exact same condition as when they provided it.
Right. So, back to Neil's situation now, since we got some of those. Man, how do you ever get God damn, I got to fucking talk about this again? By the way.
No, I mean, it's my job. B, I'm very passionate about it. So I love and enjoy talking about it.
Gotcha.
And, so no sweat.
Sometimes I remember fighting hey, what's your game plan? I'm like, yo, dude, I just talked about that to that guy over there. So just go listen to that fucking tape.
I've never gotten that way. I feel like if I ever do get that way, maybe it's time for me to find something else to do.
Sure.
Because you got to put all your energy into this. And look, I really appreciate this, because the more of these that I do, the more great questions like you're asking here that get out publicly, I think the better the program is.
Information, right? When we have information, we all do better as a society.
Absolutely.
So, all right. So Neil, test clean one day. And then, I don't know, what was it, 2 or 3 days later?
I think it was 4. Yeah.
Okay. A picogram. A picogram is what or 5, whatever it was. So small, where everyone has come out and said that there's no way he saw any benefit from this.
Yeah. And let me take a step back. So we changed the program a couple of years ago. We used to announce when USADA told us, hey, the A samples tested positive. We then, contact the athlete. And then we announced that. But what we found was, as science was getting better and better, we were running into a lot of cases that ultimately were the result of the athlete really not doing anything on purpose, a tainted supplement,
right.
Or, we've even had meat contamination cases. And we just said, this isn't fair to the athlete, because in that period where we were figuring out where it came from, they were labeled as a cheater. And a lot of times the initial story that comes out or labeled never goes away. Even if 3 or 4 months later it was said, it actually was a small contaminant in a supplement.
I think Neil's been the first case where everyone's been on his side.
But what Neil did that was unique. And hey, I think this goes towards showing that Neil, didn't do anything on purpose. He chose himself to announce, hey, I tested positive. I want to let everybody know that this is out there and why I was taken off this card. So that's why we're able to talk about it, even though the case hasn't been resolved yet.
Right.
And we're still looking at it, investigating it, testing things. So I just want to make that clear. People saying, well, why is Jeff talking about Neil's case and, not all these other cases? Because there's many other cases we have in the pipeline that haven't been publicly disclosed.
Stupid in my opinion.
Really, I mean, one would say, and look, it's always up to the athlete, but if you really didn't do anything wrong, why wouldn't you talk about it, right?
Mm-hmm.
But absolutely, I mean, it's Eliot, I'm telling you, it's the biggest frustration that I have these days. I got into this program to catch athletes that were intentionally cheating, and it seems like as science is getting better and better, more and more athletes, like in Neil's situation, are getting wrapped up and caught in this, where they're, by all looks of things, not doing anything on purpose, but testing for these very, very low picogram amounts. But, unfortunately, we have to, you can't let a fight go on until you figured out what is going on. But, man, we need to find a solution to this, because science, in some regards, I think has almost gotten ahead of the game here a little bit. And when it comes to fairness and due process for our athletes, I think that's just as important in any testing program as how strong and comprehensive the program is. You got to have fairness, due process, or your athletes are going to lose faith in the program. And I don't care for what reason. Once they lose faith in the program, then your program is really useless. Yes. So it's an issue that we're looking really, really hard at now. How do we differentiate between someone who's cheating on purpose versus someone who is exposed to such a low level, say in a contaminated supplement, that A, it's not really doing them any good, and obviously B, they didn't do anything on purpose.
Right. All right. So that brings me to the next question of John Jones, who he's the greatest fighter of all time. It looks like, it looks like that's where he's headed for sure. I think we still have to wait to see the end of his career, probably. Correct? Because I think we've said that about a lot of people. Like Anderson was considered the greatest fighter of all time, and now he's fighting at 42 years old or however old he is, and he's losing. So that tarnishes probably.
Yeah, I'd agree with you. Yep.
Where like George, he came back for one fight, beat up Bisping, and then so it moved George up a little bit, I would say. In that conversation, because he took all that time off, had one fight against a champion, and looked phenomenal. But anyway, back to John. So, God, I am still so lost on this. He tests positive for picograms, and how and previously had tested positive. Tell me when I'm wrong. I guess. Sure. And previously had tested positive for cheating. So he was a cheater. Am I correct?
Yeah, well, let me
You go. Yeah. What am I doing?
So,
why let the fucking dumbass talk? Let the smart guy talk.
Not at all. So he's had two separate instances on the USADA program. The first one, he tested positive. I think it was two substances, basically estrogen inhibitor-like substances.
Okay.
I think we definitively showed where that one came from. That was the infamous, I guess you want to call it, tainted dick pill. Pills. He basically came out and said, look, I didn't do this on purpose. We're like, okay, what have you been using? And he's like, hey, a buddy of mine, we're out one night, gave me this pill. I took it. We actually had some of the pills left over that we got from the buddy. And sure enough, turned out to have these two substances in it. He went actually to arbitration. So
that is definitely true then. You found those two substances in those dick pills he took.
We found it. So look, what are the odds of the coincidence of that? The pill, we actually USADA obtained some pills independently of John and his buddy from the website where they got them from. And those tested positive, so there was no way that they could have tampered, with those or put that in it.
So John Jones did not give you the pills.
So here's how it works. When an athlete tests positive and it's suspected that it came from something other than doing it on purpose, a supplement or a medication, the initial thing that happens is the athlete submits. Hopefully they have some of the supplement or medication left over. So they'll submit that. We'll send that to the laboratory and it's tested. If that comes up positive, USADA says, okay, that's a good first step, but we have to eliminate the possibility that the athlete tainted this supplement or this medication on purpose. Who's to say they didn't say, oh, shoot, here's a built-in excuse. I'm going to sprinkle some steroid powder in my supplement. And that way I'll have the excuse of where it came from.
Got it.
So in those cases where the athlete provided substance test positive, USADA then goes out completely separate of the athlete and attempts to obtain it independently. So either from a supplement company. There's been instances where USADA has gone to a pharmacy where an athlete got a medication from and posed as a patient and got more of that medication. And then that independently procured substance has to test positive as well at the laboratory for the athlete to get a break. And that's what happened in John's initial case. So there's no way in the world, I mean, unless John was conspiring with the website where it came from, which there's no indication of that. There's no way in the world that it didn't come from that tainted dick pill. Despite that, finding that it come from the tainted dick pill, John went to arbitration in this case. So these arbitrators or judges, even separate of USADA, heard the case, heard both sides. And they said, okay, looks very much, like it came from this tainted pill. But he was so careless and operated at such reckless disregard, we're not going to give him any credit. He should have not taken a pill that somebody gave him in this program. So he got the maximum 1 year for those substances, despite the fact it was shown he didn't do anything on purpose. So that was the first time around.
So why did TJ get 2 years?
So TJ tested positive for EPO. So basically under our program, there are 2 sets of substances that are treated differently. And I guess the reason being is one provides you more of a performance enhancement benefit than the other. So EPO is one of the king of performance enhancements. It does all kinds of great stuff for you.
For us, it is the king, right? If you don't get tired out there, man, you're fucking set.
You tell me, man, because you fought, I didn't. I mean, what would it mean to be able to breeze through 3 or 5 round fights without having that monkey jump on your back? I mean, it means everything, right?
So let's before we get back into like the particular cases, what we were talking about here. So let's be clear. I didn't have the skills to make a difference. Okay, so like I think at my very best skill level, wherever I was, if I would have gone and fought John Jones, a clean John Jones, and I could have been hopped up on every supplement out there, I'm still going to lose. So in my opinion, I wasn't good enough. But look, you're talking about somebody who, like TJ, who is good enough, who is a top 1% of the 1%. So yeah, that's going to make a massive difference at that level.
Yep, absolutely. And I think why you see that he's been sanctioned and suspended for 2 years, which is a big chunk of time, especially, when you in your early mid 30s, it's the prime of your career you're missing.
Yes, because I just hate the argument of, man, if I would have done steroids, I would have fucking been in Major League. No, you wouldn't.
Man,
you wouldn't.
I give you a prime example of that. You have to have talent to be great. Absolutely. You couldn't take me and pump me up full of steroids and EPO. Every single fighter, including every 115-pound female on the roster, would kick my ass. Doesn't matter.
It doesn't matter. You have to have skills.
Absolutely. So I saw a perfect example. I mean, it's baseball, different sport, but the San Francisco Giants probably had the most players under the Balco program, close to a dozen. And not every no one of those 12 even came close to what Barry Bonds did. They were on the exact same program that he was. He hit 760 career home runs, 73 in one season, and nobody else on that team touched 30 and 40.
They didn't come close to what Barry Bonds did before Barry Bonds went on steroids.
Exactly. He was a great baseball player to begin with before. So it doesn't make you, Superman in and of itself. But if you do have those world-class skills and you add on to it some of these substances, holy shit. I mean, it makes you literally invincible. Invincible. So, yes. So then when you take somebody like TJ, who is already very, very good, very, very good, and then you put on I'll never get tired button, like it's like the NOS button on race cars, right? In like the Fast and the Furious. Like if you can just hit that button over and over and over again, you're a fucking killer. Yeah, it's scary what it could do, and obviously concerns me because this sport isn't hitting balls over a fence or riding bike up a side of a mountain. Right. This is two of the baddest MFers on the planet going at each other, and so That's why I'm here.
Imagine a little more juice on that knee to Ben Askren's head this weekend.
Holy shit.
Right? It was bad enough.
Yeah.
Right? It was bad enough. A little more juice, 10% more juice. Holy fuck, man. That guy, he might be dead.
And Eliot, that's the concerns that Lorenzo Fertitta and Dana White had 4 or 5 years ago and said, hey, no one's requiring us to do this. State commissions already do some testing. So, we're good in terms of them. But we see that's not good enough. In the old days when there was testing primarily just around the fight, a UFC or any MMA athlete could use all these substances during training camp, do the research, figure out how long these things clear your system, get off them, a couple weeks or a month before the fight. You're still going to retain a lot of the benefits a month or a couple weeks later, but the drug's going to be cleared from your system.
Right.
And so Lorenzo Fertitta and Dana White knew that, and they said, we love this sport. Our athletes are our assets. This is going to cost a lot of money. It's going to not be without consequences where we're going to lose fights at the last minute, but this is the absolute right thing to do for the overall health of the sport of MMA. So I give them all the credit in the world for realizing that and doing it.
I'm going to bite back a little bit.
All right,
I agree with you, but I'm going to bite back a little bit. They always had the plan of selling. So they knew where to make the most value as well, I think.
Yeah, I actually love hearing that. That means that this program brings value to this company and the sport. And you never know, but we all have heard what that sales figure was a couple of years ago.
Mm-hmm.
It does bring me some level of pride to show that despite this program costing so much, it also brings value to it. And I think it mainstreams it. And hopefully I would like to think that the reason you have this huge entity like ESPN owned by Disney jumped on board with us is hey, this is a legit sport now. We know what we're seeing is real out there. And these guys and this company is doing the right thing in terms of trying to protect its athletes and the long-term health of them and the sport.
Because there's only one thing that's really going to bring it down, is that's a death.
Absolutely.
That's the only thing
that ever want to see that. And you could imagine if you did have a scenario like that and it was determined to be from somebody using, without regard, performance enhancing drugs and really an entity doing nothing about it.
Yeah, it would be. Yeah. And so if you, that's the value that I think it's brought, going back, is that, holy shit, right? A big company will come on like WME, to purchase, because, you can't, they would never take that risk if they felt like they could be crushed from it.
Yeah. I don't think it's the only reason they did, but I like to think it played a little part of it.
No, of course it's not the only reason.
Makes me proud to think that.
Yeah, no, it's not the only reason. No way. But it definitely helped. Definitely helped. All right. So back to John Jones. Sorry. We sidetracked there.
Yeah. So then the second time around, right off the bat, he tests positive, the first positive test for this. It's called the M3 metabolite. It's a long-term lasting metabolite from a drug called dihydrochloromethyltestosterone, or oral turinabol. And it was a drug developed in the Eastern Bloc countries in the 60s and 70s and used primarily there.
Icarus, right? Wasn't that what Icarus is all about?
If you watch the Netflix doc, for your listeners, anybody who hasn't watched it and is interested in the subject matter, get on Netflix and watch Icarus. It's fascinating. It details a state-sponsored drug program by the Russians, kind of leading up to and after the Sochi Olympics, and details this, director of the laboratory over there. And it's fucking crazy the extent things were going on over there. The KGB was involved. They were drilled holes in the laboratory in the middle of the night during the Sochi Olympic Games and were passing out what they knew as dirty Russian athlete samples and passing back into the laboratory through a hole in the wall, clean urine that they had collected from them a couple months earlier. So just absolutely incredible, really frustrating to the anti-doping movement, because when you're talking about, an instance where the KGB is involved, how the hell are you going to prevent that? I don't think there's an answer to that. So crazy story. So anyway,
I would say that someone like John Jones or any athlete does not have that kind of power.
You wouldn't think so, man. It takes a lot of resources and power to have something like that. Lance Armstrong, who I investigated at the tail end of my federal agent days, I think maybe did have that power and had the financial resources to do it. But I think most, if not all, of our athletes, I don't think would, and certainly where they wouldn't have the services of the KGB or the CIA or anything like that.
Right. I do want to get into Lance later, but let's keep going. Go ahead, John Jones.
Yeah. So anyway, John tested positive for this drug that was used pretty prominently by the Russians and kind of developed by them. This Russian scientist in the Icarus movie did some studies, ironically, on this drug, and saw that, hey, not only after you take the drug for a shorter period of time does the parent compound of the drug and these short-term metabolites show up in your urine, but he discovered this, what they call long-term metabolites. So you take the drug, the body breaks it down, and this one metabolite, the M3 metabolite, he thought stayed for a long time. And in his opinion, a long time was 45 to 60 days. We've now seen, because John's the most tested, I guarantee you this, Eliot, he is the most tested athlete on the planet Earth over the last 6 or 7 months, because not only is he in the USADA program, but California State Athletic Commission is testing him separately, and the Nevada State Athletic Commission is testing him separately. He has undergone in the last 6 or 7 months, the exact number, 30 or 40 tests. I mean, he's literally tested a couple times a week, sometimes 3 or 4 times a week. And over the last 2 years.
So that doesn't sound like a lot, but let's be clear. There's only 52 weeks in a year.
Yeah.
Okay.
And it's already,
right?
We're only halfway through
and we're
the
only
year.
halfway through the year. So you're like, 30 times, what's 30? That's a lot.
That's a lot of
That's
tests.
a lot of tests. Okay. Just like, I think sometimes people hear a small number like 30 and they go, oh, yeah. There's 52 weeks in a year, guys. We're halfway through. So he's been tested more than once a week.
Absolutely. And in literally over the last 2 years since he's been tested and this metabolite first showed up, it's still showing up, number one, still at very small picogram level amounts. He averages between 10, 20, 30. And at that level, what scientists tell me is like, some people say, oh, he went from 10 picograms to 30 picograms. He must be doing something. Well, no, when you detect down to that low of a level, it's an imperfect science. So there's a variance in any given test. And what the scientists have told me is that variance could be anywhere from 20 to 30, sometimes 40 picograms. So, as long as you're not exceeding maybe 100 picograms, you're still in the relatively same amount. So not only is he continuing to show at these low picogram levels, you never, ever in any of his tests have seen any of the parent compound or any of the short or midterm metabolites. And those short and midterm metabolites, studies have shown, will show up for 2 to 3 weeks. So he's never gone a week without being tested. And he's never shown those short or midterm metabolites. And what that means is, however that substance got in his system, it's not continuing to get in his system. You would see evidence at least of those short or midterm metabolites, if not the parent compound, and you've never seen that in his system. So what it is, it's one of these really strange substances that when it enters into your body, whether done on purpose or on accident, it tends to stay there for a long damn time. He's now going on 2 years, and there's scientists now writing papers on his case because it was a substance when the initial study was done. They didn't get it right or understand it. The scientists initially said 45 to 60 days it should stick around, and this one stuck around for 2 years. So, it's scary to me because you could have a situation with an athlete that is not a UFC athlete. So they're on the, amateur, regional, local circuit, and say they're just using supplements, right? And they're not being careful with their supplement uses because they don't know. No one's educated them about how to make safe supplement choices. So they're taking bad supplements, let's say, unbeknownst to them.
Okay, hold on. Real supplements, not steroids. They're
real legit supplements. Check this out. We've seen the DHCMT or the oral turinabol, the thing that caused the John Jones long-term M3 metabolite. We have a case currently of an athlete that took a women's multivitamin, and we found it in that. A women's multivitamin. So we're not even talking about a sports supplement like a protein or a creatine or one of these crazy, pre-workouts or testosterone booster supplements. We're talking a women's multivitamin, and it was in it. So the concern you have if this thing can stay around for 2 or 3 years, is you get some up and coming fighter who hasn't had the benefit of being educated by the UFC, which we do to all of our new fighters. The first thing we do is say, look, here's how serious our program is. Here's how careful you have to be with supplement choices. These fighters haven't had the benefit of that. So what happens if they just, unbeknownst to them, take a bad supplement, 2 years before getting into the UFC?
Yeah, we'll have to go to Jamba Juice, right, and get a scoop of protein.
Well, that's good. I would advise not even to do that.
Right,
I advise that to our athletes.
But yeah, that's the hard thing, right? Is
exactly.
you just won your very first, you just won your first 3 fights, yada yada. You're fucking nobody. Your family's going to Jamba Juice. Everyone drinks a Jamba Juice. Like, holy shit, man.
Absolutely. And it could happen as something as benign as that. So it's scary. It's a scary proposition to me. I get so frustrated by these cases, Eliot, like Neil's, that come down where everything on the surface is pointing to this athlete did not do anything on purpose. Not only in Neil's case does it indicate that, but because he had that negative test 4 days before and then test positive at a super, super low level, the indications are that he didn't even retain any benefits from however that, got into his system. There was no athletic performance enhancing benefits. So, I mean, it's something these days that keeps me up at night. I'm telling you, because that's not the reason that I'm here, is to,
you're not trying to ruin someone's life and career.
Exactly. For taking a scoop of protein out of Jamba Juice that had something at such a, microscopic level in it. It frustrates me, and we need to find answers on how to focus on catching the cheaters and not, people that are taking, a bad supplement.
I think you might have convinced me on the John Jones case, because I was not I was not on your side on this, I will say, at the beginning of this podcast. Just because I felt like look, if you're a cheater, right? Which I was unaware, I guess, of the process that he went through, that he provided dick pills, and then USADA went out and got their own dick pills of his.
Yeah.
But I am of the belief that, let's say you're a cheater, let's say you actually took something and you get busted, and now you can't test clean picogram levels. I don't give a fuck. You shouldn't fight.
Yeah, but I think, though, I don't think, and look, this is an opinion that I've developed over time, especially in this day and age, but I think you got to be cautious in talking absolutes like that. Like, hey, if A happens, then it's definitely B. I think, and look, it's very cliche, but I always say it, you have to look at each individual case on its own facts and merits. You have to. And there's no 2 cases that are exactly the same. And so we do that in this program. Every athlete is, at least initially, given the benefit of the doubt. If they call myself or Donna Marcolini, that works with me in this department, and say, Jeff, Donna, I did not do this, help me, we're going to help them try to figure it out. Until I always tell them, until you give me reason not to believe you, I'm going to believe you. So yeah, I mean, you got to be careful about, again, talking absolutes, because, hey, somebody got caught with a tainted dick pill. That means the second time around, they're definitely doing something if something shows up. Well, I mean, in John's case, he's never had that parent short or midterm metabolite showed up. Always a strange long-term metabolite that seems to hibernate in the body and somehow.
So I guess my argument a second ago was, if you actually did take the cheating thing, right? If you actually cheated, if you took oral turinabol, let's say, and now you can't test clean from oral turinabol, you keep
then it's on you. It's on you.
Now it's on you, because you
absolutely
not a dick pill, right? Not a dick pill. You actually I'm going to take a steroid to get better, And now you're John Jones, and you keep testing. Let's say John would have done that.
Yep.
You should not be able to ever fight again, because that's on you.
Yeah, I tend to agree with you there. But in this case, there's been zero evidence that he did do it on purpose. I mean, he was already tested probably more than the average athlete was after the tainted dick pill. And look, hey, I'm not saying that because you're tested a lot, that's going to prohibit you from doing, but you have to be fucking crazy to be tested that much, to already have a strike against you, knowing that the next time you get caught, it doubles the penalties. You have to be pretty fucking crazy.
If you're lucky, it doubles the penalties, right? They could give you an indefinite suspension, correct?
Yeah, I mean, there's something in our policy called aggravating circumstances. So if you're taking a drug and you do something to manipulate your urine so the drug won't show up, or you're taking more than one drug, one to hide the other, there's a clause called aggravating circumstances that come into effect, and that doubles the penalty even further. So yeah, you're talking some crazy long sanction suspension times in those scenarios. And look, the career of an MMA fighter is, short, relatively average career. And so I don't think in most of those scenarios you'd ever see that fighter fighting again.
I mean, okay. I mean, I don't want to rag on TJ. I like TJ. But let's just use his case, right? Like, so he comes back in 2 years and, let's say his first fight or two doesn't go very well. And then he's like, oh God. And then so he starts doing EPO again, and then he's hiding it. He's going to be fucked if he gets caught again. Yeah,
he'd be looking at anywhere from 4 to 8 year sanction in a case like that.
And at 35, that means done.
Done, yeah.
Right.
Yep.
So, and man, let's be very clear. That was not like a rag on TJ. TJ has already been caught for what he did, and we're talking about a 4 instance in the future.
No, absolutely. And look, I don't want to, slam TJ either here. I mean, if you want to look for some way to give him credit, hey, he accepted it and admitted to it.
He owned it.
Said he owned it. I think you got to give him a little bit of credit from that. He's now having to sit out for 2 years. And so, yeah, I mean, we'll see what the future holds from him.
We'll see what the future holds. Look, I wish nobody anything but the best. I wish him the best. I hope he comes back from this. Unless my fighter Corey is the champion, I hope if Corey's the champion, yeah. So, but I think everyone can understand that. All right, I got to move on. God, okay, Lance Armstrong. I've wanted to talk to you about Lance Armstrong, Jeff, before I knew you. I'm sure a lot of people do. Here's my argument with Lance. Yes, he cheated. Of course he did. As did every single other motherfucker in that sport. Absolutely. Lance did Lance Armstrong is maybe, I don't know, maybe he's changed. Let's hope he's changed. Lance Armstrong was one of the ultimate cocksuckers to ever enter sports. Okay, I have a buddy who worked for a racing team, and he spent a lot of time around Lance, and he's told me he's like, Eliot, you don't understand how much of a prick this guy is. Like, you can't understand it. But, and I get it, all of that aside, fuck, he did a lot of good for the world, man.
Yeah, no, definitely his foundation, lives strong. And we looked into this. There were allegations that, the foundation was phony, that he was benefiting personally from that, kind of on the side. And
right.
While that, there may have been some instances of error, it definitely did a lot of good. I mean, they were a legit foundation, did a lot of good, gave a lot of people a lot of hope and encouragement that did suffer from cancer to see his, alleged story of how he came back from it and was so successful.
Whoa. What do you mean alleged?
Whoa.
You dropped a bomb on me, Jeff. He didn't have cancer?
No. He definitely had cancer, but part of it was, wow, he came back and look how successful he was after it. Well, I mean, the story of why he was so successful and was able to keep up is because he was cheating. Now, along with everybody else, he wasn't alone.
I disagree with you. I disagree with you on why he was able to do so well.
Bring it then. Tell me what you think.
I think that because and we're not going to deny the cheating aspect. Like 100% cheater, but everyone else too. So when you're riding up that mountain, right, and it's death. What you and I will consider death.
Yep.
Lance knows it's not. Lance knows what death feels like. He knocked on the door. So he can go, yeah, this is fucking god awful. This is awful, but this is not death. So I'll go.
Yeah, I think that, in terms of, look, and I've talked to all these guys, you could use all the drugs in the world. You're still suffering like a motherfucker on those,
right.
2-hour long climbs up the French Alps. Absolutely. But, his story, if you go read it, and he was very aggressive out there publicly because there was a lot of allegations against him saying, hey, this is bullshit.
Right.
The reason he's at the top of the sport is he's got the best drug program in the sport. He's cheating just like everybody else was. And he came out very aggressively, publicly. No, I'm not. This is a fucking great story. I'm clean. I am the best cyclist because I've gone through this adversity in my life. And that just wasn't the case, man. He was cheating. He had the best program in sports. He was dedicating the most money to it. And he was crushing people who tried to challenge him.
He was destroying people's lives. He was destroying people's lives.
Going to court. Greg LeMond, you know, one of the greatest U.S. cyclists before him, had a multi-million-dollar bicycle deal with Trek, and Armstrong ended that because LeMond was questioning, you know, his success. He had a masseuse that didn't have a pot to piss in. She was making nothing. Emma O'Reilly took her to court, sued her because she was telling, you know, a truthful story about, hey, I was helping him out. I was going to the store and buying makeup and covering the needle marks where he had done, you know, IV infusions of EPO, and he was like bullshit and crushed her. So yeah, I mean, when you talk about,
he's a piece of shit. He's personally a piece of shit.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not going to label anyone, but if you look at what he did, he was as aggressive as it comes, knowing that these people were telling the truth and going after them. And that was unlike any other cheater that I had seen in sports. Most of them, they were cheating, but
they stayed quiet,
weren't crushing people. Exactly.
They stayed quiet. They keep their mouth shut
and using the courts to do it. The other thing was a trip, Eliot. So here I am investigating him. I'm in the middle of investigating him. At this point, I had done Balco, I had done Bonds, I had done Roger Clemens, I had worked with Senator Mitchell and the Mitchell Report. So
Did you get Marion Jones?
Marion
too?
Jones, exactly. Okay. So it was very public of who I was as an agent and what I was doing. And so when the media found out I was investigating Armstrong, the sports media went fucking bananas over it, and it got, you know, all this publicity. Well, Armstrong, in the middle of the investigation, is taunting me on his Twitter account. He's finding out, like, I'm traveling to Europe, and we went to Lyon, France, and met at Interpol. So we met with all these federal agencies from all throughout the world, Spanish, French, Belgium, and they all had information too. So we were sharing information. He goes on his Twitter accounts like, Jeff, you know, you fucking fly in first class to Europe, staying in 4-star hotels. Like, I hope you're having fun. And I'm reading this, and I'm like, is this guy fucking insane? Like, look, I'm still going to just follow the evidence, but don't get me wrong. Like, there were mornings I woke up and, you know, a little bit tired or wanted to go home, and did it not provide me extra motivation to work even harder? It certainly did. I mean, I thought the dude was just absolutely crazy for doing that.
Right. Yeah, he should have left you alone. I mean, as it turns out, he should have just left you. You can't, and okay, let me say all the things that I just said about Lance, like him being a piece of shit and whatnot. I'm a fan. I'm still a fan because I like to see greatness. I love to see people do what Lance did. It's my favorite thing. I like that more than the underdog story. I don't.
Dude, let me tell you two things. I cycle. That's how I get my cardio.
Okay.
I played college basketball, have a torn ACL. I've had a couple herniated disc surgeries, so I can't do for cardio anything high impact.
Right.
So I ride a bike. I love riding my bike. It makes me feel like free, like I'm flying. Dude, I love watching the Tour de France. I've watched it for 20, 25 years. I'm just amazed at how these guys do it. And I was the huge fan when he was winning all those tours too, man. I loved watching that.
Right.
And look, I'll give him more credit here. A good story. So Floyd Landis, who won the 2006 Tour de France, ended up being one of my biggest sources. And this is publicly out there. I worked with him for a couple of years.
He got busted too, right?
He got busted too. He actually, the year he won the Tour de France, the second to last stage, he got killed on the third to last stage, lost his lead. The second to last stage, the penultimate stage, he fucking flew up that mountain and put the lead right back on everyone and won the Tour because of that. A urine sample he provided right after that stage came back positive for testosterone. So he got busted, was suspended for, I think, 4 years. And he ultimately ended up working with me. We wired him up in this one scenario, put a little camera on his button on his shirt.
Fuck yeah.
So I've talked to him like extensively. Here's what he told me about Lance. He said, without a doubt, the baddest motherfucker ever in cycling. He says, if you took drugs completely out of the equation and everyone was clean, Lance Armstrong would have won all those tours. You know, everyone was on drugs. Well, his maybe were a little bit bigger. He was a complete badass. And Landis does not like Lance at all. He feels that, look, he took a bullet for racing for Lance, sat out the 4 years. And when he came back, when his suspension was over, he went to Lance, is like, okay, man, I'm ready to go. I kept quiet. You know, I stuck with the company line, like, let me back in. And Lance told him, man, you're too toxic. We can't let you back.
Yeah.
And that pissed him off. So he does not like him, but still gives him credit as the baddest cyclist of all time.
Well, that's good because, like, there's not, I don't think you can argue it. There's no argument. It just doesn't exist, in my opinion.
Yeah, because, you know, drugs do a lot for you, but there's so many adversities that you run into, you know, riding those tours, crashes, and you got to have mental toughness beyond mental toughness to win that many in a row. Absolutely.
The drugs can't change what's between your ears.
I agree. And yeah, I'll agree with you there. It did probably, you know, almost being on the brink of death did give him that mental toughness that exceeded all others.
Which we can't understand. Like, we don't know what that's like, you know? So,
dude, I marvel at mental toughness every day with these UFC fighters in the MMA world. And you could probably speak better to that. But, man, what it takes to take that walk to the octagon, there's nothing like it in any sport in terms of how mentally tough you have to be.
When people say to me, like, and they say, man, back in the day, man, if Mike Tyson was still in his prime, I'd fight him for $2 million. And I'm like, no, you wouldn't. You know?
Yeah.
Maybe you would show up at the arena. Maybe you would show up at the arena. But let me tell you, man, walking, fuck you. You won't walk. And not like go out there and take the first jab. If you really had to go, like, fight, like, that was a stipulation, was that you had to fight, not just like take a punch and fall down. You wouldn't. You would shit a brick.
Dude, it's crazy. And maybe I'll turn the tables here a little bit and ask you a question. But yeah. I'm fascinated because I get these stories about what you think are the most intimidating, toughest UFC fighters we have on the roster that are scared to fucking death fight week. Their anxiety levels are so high. Their stomachs are churning. And I hear this all the time. And I'm like, this guy or this girl? Are you kidding me? They like, I see them walking the octagon. It looks like it's fun for them. They're feeling that. And I mean, what I'm told is almost without exception, it's few and far between of those athletes that don't feel any of that.
The best thing for me was The Ultimate Fighter. I hated every second of it. There's not a single part of that fucking thing that I like. I almost hate Las Vegas because of the Ultimate Fighter. Like, it was the worst 6 weeks of my life. No, it was the second worst 6 weeks of my life. Outside of my anxiety when I had a breakdown after fighting. But the one of the really great parts was you got to see everyone else be really, really fucking scared.
Man, I respect you all so much that have made that walk, and just makes me so proud and happy to be working, you know, in this sport, because the respect I have for MMA fighters just is completely off the charts. I mean, I respect any professional athlete, what it takes to get to the pinnacle of their sport, but there's nothing like this sport.
There's nothing like fighting.
Nothing like it.
And I hate saying it, and I don't want to sound like arrogant and conceited, because, like, life is hard. You know, like, I think life can be very hard for everyone. But the difficulty that this sport brings is really, really, really high. You know, really high. How did you get into it? What made you come over?
Dude, the story's so crazy how I got here. So my oldest daughter played club volleyball, traveling volleyball. So, you know, traveled all throughout the States and pretty high level. So she had a tournament in Las Vegas, and I drove her out, and a former special agent buddy of mine had retired and gone on to work. He's the vice president of money laundering, anti-money laundering with Stations Casinos, owned by the Fertittas.
Right.
And so we come out to Vegas and go out to dinner, have a couple beers. And he's like, hey, man, you should come by Stations headquarters. I'll introduce you to my boss. And I'm like, okay, cool. So the next day I come out there. He introduces me to his boss, the former sheriff of Clark County, who works for Lorenzo Fertitta. His name's Bill Young. And so we start talking shop, similar to how we're talking today, the Armstrong case, whatever. And he's like, man, and what had just happened was Anderson Silva, Nick Diaz, where I think both of them tested positive in that fight. And so he's like, yeah, Lorenzo's having issues with drug testing. I'd love to put you in touch with him. So I'm like, hell yeah, absolutely. That would be cool to talk to the owner of the UFC. And so a couple weeks later, we set a lunch meeting at UFC. So I took the day off of work, my federal agent work. I flew myself out to Vegas because I'm like, how often you get an opportunity to talk to the owner of a big major professional sports entity. So just had a lunch meeting with Lorenzo, Dana, Lawrence Epstein, our chief operating officer, Kirk Hendrick, the chief legal guy at the time. And it wasn't a job interview. They didn't say like, hey, I just thought, man, it's cool thing to share knowledge. Yeah. So we had a great lunch meeting. It was cool. Went home. Bill Young calls me like 2 days later. He's like, dude, are you sitting down? Like, you want to come work for these guys? And I'm like, I can't do that. I'm a federal agent. I'm a couple years away from retirement. He's like, hey, you should listen to these guys. And I did. And one thing led to another. And next thing I know, I was moving to Vegas and working for the UFC.
Man, see that dude, that's such a cool story because like I fucking hate this. Like, oh man, you want me to talk to you? You got to pay me my worth. Look, this is some bullshit. Just go talk to somebody. Who cares? Who cares? Pay me my worth. Like, I think one of the coolest things you did, man, and this is what I always wanted to talk to you. But like I really wanted to talk to you when Neil got busted because Neil got busted, and I shouldn't say busted. Neil tested positive. Because I don't like busted. Busted is like when you actually cheated.
You wait till the case has been adjudicated, I think, to make that determination and define that. Because many of these cases, like I talked about, like they're not busted. They just, somehow ingested something unbeknownst to them in very small quantities. And it's not busting somebody in that scenario.
So he didn't get busted. So, Neil tested positive for a supplement. So anyway, you and I don't handle stuff like that really well because my job is to get my fighters to the fight healthy, ready, and ready to perform. Well, I felt like this was a failure on my part because I had no fucking clue what makes people test, So I was getting on the phone with you a couple, I think we talked like 2 or 3 times. And then you just said to me, you were like, hey man, how about I just come out to Denver and like talk to the guys? And I was like, really? Like, you'll do that? And you were like, well, yeah, that's my job. And sure, and I get it, man. It's your job. But you don't have to do that. You guys already put out all kinds of information, right? Like, it's not like you have to fly to Denver. And you're just, and so that's what made me like, I'm like, oh man, I got to talk to Jeff I wanted to talk to Jeff because like, I thought that like was really, really, really cool of you, man. Like that was, because you were like, look, your young athletes need to know what's going on. And my young athletes can't do shit for you right now. There is nothing that my young athletes are doing for you.
Yeah, I thought it was a great session at your gym a couple of weeks ago. And I thank you for the opportunity to do that. And any other gyms or fight teams that are listening to this that want me to do it, please call me up. I'll go anywhere. That is my job. I'll go back to what you said. You saw like the Neil thing as a failure on your behalf. When these cases come down the pipe, I see it the same way on my behalf. I see it as a failure on my behalf. My job, my primary job here is to educate our fighters to avoid them getting in trouble. I don't take any satisfaction in our fighters, whether they cheated on purpose or not, testing positive. I see it as a failure on my behalf because I haven't gotten the message out enough that, hey, this is a rock solid program. If you do something on purpose, or even if you're not careful enough on how you're choosing supplements, looking at your medications, you're going to get caught in this program. And when those come down the pipe, I see like, damn, how did I not get to that guy or that girl's head? So I feel the same way. But yeah, I mean, I think we had a great session at your gym. I think you had about 30 of your fighters show up, a couple of UFC people, but mainly non-UFC that, are aspiring to get the UFC. And as we talked about earlier, if you don't start taking these precautions and steps early on, now knowing that some of these substances can last in your body for 2 years, you're going to get caught up in something real bad real quick under this program. So that to me is the most important part of my job, getting out and educating our fighters, letting them get to know me so they trust me, so that when they have a question, They don't say, oh man, this Jeff Novitzky guy like bested Lance Armstrong, and I'm intimidated. I don't want to call him. Like, bullshit. Like, I am available 365 days a year, 24/7 to our fighters, and that's the more calls I get, the more questions I get, the better I feel, and the better the program works. So,
is that absolutely a hard thing for you to get over? Because most people, I would say, okay, so I know better now. And I would hope most of the fighters know better now too. But when you first came over, I thought you were still USADA. I thought you were going out and still catching the athletes. So is that a hard thing for you to switch in people's minds, that like, so you are the guy that busted Balco, busted Barry, busted Lance, busted Marion, and now you're on the athlete side of helping them. What's that process been like?
Yeah, it is. And I knew right away this is going to be the biggest obstacle to overcome, because I am known as the nation's steroid cop.
Yeah, you're
right?
the golden snitch.
That's like the golden snitch.
Yeah.
So here he comes. He's coming to fucking bust me, right?
Yeah,
and I knew right away. I'm like, I got to overcome that, number one. And that's a lot of the reason why we went to USADA. Like, let's let somebody else be the steroid cop. I'm going to be the guy that's trying to keep you out of trouble. Now, look, if you're intentionally cheating, screw you. I have no time for you. But what UFC fighters or MMA fighters, as you were talking about earlier, came from before, where it's just fucking open season and using drugs. So I feel like having to use to protect myself almost. So yeah, I mean, in those, I lost my train of thought a little bit there, but in those, in that scenario, that was the biggest challenge and obstacle I had to overcome. That I am not the guy trying to bust everyone. My role is to keep you out of trouble. Yeah.
So, I mean, that I can imagine, I could imagine like, that's just almost reinventing yourself.
Yeah. And that was I give some credit to Rogan who let me on his show. I think, that long form podcast, just like this one. And thank you for this. Like, you can't get to know someone in some article online or in magazine or newspaper.
It's the worst thing we got going on right now, man.
It is. Right? Social media, these, quick 40-character hits. The long-form podcast is the only way to go. That and getting out in person in front of these athletes. And that's why I go, especially early on, I tried to get out and I traveled the world to get to as many events as I could. And look, my fight week, because USADA is doing testing, like I'm not working, going and testing athletes. I'm doing a lot of my work remotely back from the office in Vegas. But those 5 to 10 minute conversations I have with fighters, with coaches like you, whether it be in the gym of the hotel, in the elevator ride up and down, in the lobby bar on Saturday night where the whole traveling road crew gets together and has a few drinks to unwind, those go such a long way in getting people to know me that, oh shit, Jeff's on our side here. He's trying to keep us out of trouble, not coming in trying to, blow up the sport and blow up my career.
Yeah, man, the whole like reading articles thing and watching CNN or Fox News, whatever the fuck you're watching, that is the worst way to gain information in the world. Okay, I won't say I'll say journal. I hate journalistic articles. A peer-reviewed study, yes. Like, like a paper, yes. You got, but like, these quick 5-minute snippets where like they're gonna take like where what they're gonna listen to is hear me call Lance Armstrong a cocksucker, and then you say, yeah, he wasn't the best guy, and then they make a whole thing off of that, right? Like, and you're like, dude, you didn't even listen to what we said. You didn't even fucking listen to what we said. It drives me insane.
It's so hard today because, it's a 24-hour news cycle. Every damn person has an opinion. It's so hard to get, some background and some validity to, making a judgment on something or having an opinion yourself that's correct. So
yeah, because then you end up wrong a lot. Like, look, I was wrong today about the John Jones thing, because I only listened to he cheated. And I didn't know the dick pill thing, like the double dick pill, like that, like that he provided and USADA got it. I didn't know the double dick pill. I'm like, yeah, fuck you, man. So I thought exactly what you thought. So he gave dick pills, and then okay, so he put some shit in his dick pill and was like, yeah, here you go. I didn't know the other part. So yeah, that was very interesting. So that's more just conversation. So I keep my podcasts right about an hour. I'm no Rogan, bro. I'm no Rogan. I keep it to right about an hour. Someday when I get to Rogan status, I'll go 2-3 hours when I don't have anything else to do, like when I just do my thing only.
Dude, let me tell you something right now. First time I've looked on the clock at the wall, I would have said we've been going for a half hour. It's been an hour and 15. So, dude, you're good.
I'm working on it.
You're good.
I'm working on it.
There's some promise there, man. You're on your way.
So, man, I appreciate it. Like I know you don't have to, again, you don't have to come and talk to me on your Monday morning when you guys just had a big fight weekend and you were obviously very busy. Where you headed? Sacramento, you said, this week? Or are you there now already?
Yeah, I'm there. I'm already. I flew back to the Bay Area. My family's here. So use this opportunity to get a little family time. But yeah, I'm already here and on to the next one this weekend.
All right, man. Well, I greatly appreciate it. And I will see you. I think my next one's Anaheim. So I'm sure I'll see you in Anaheim.
I definitely will see you there, Eliot. Sounds good, man. Thanks for having me on. Great job. I appreciate it.
Thanks, Jeff. I'll talk to you soon, man. Appreciate it.
All right. See you.
Bye. All right, guys, thanks for listening to this episode of The Gospel Fire. Don't forget to check me out on all of my social media at FireMarshal205. Again, at FireMarshal205. Go to my YouTube channel, FireMarshal01, that is, for YouTube, where you can follow. I'm making these videos 100K strong. That's the goal for the year. I want 100,000 strong listeners to the Gospel of Fire. So I'm trying to make a video a week so that you guys can follow along on my journey of how I go about my day, some things that I talk about, some things that I try to work on for myself. And then finally, don't forget my website, EliotMarshall.com, where you can get up to date with everything that has to do with me personally, the Gospel of Fire. You're going to find all about my book release, also called The Gospel of Fire, February 12th. It will be for sale on Amazon that whole week for 99 cents. So all that information at EliotMarshall.com. Thanks again for listening. Thanks to my sponsors, Evo Labs and On It. So that's it, guys. Hope you enjoyed the episode.